Hi guys, Hakua here. Today I want to talk about White Forest Fiendsmith Azamina. Now I know the Fiendsmith cards are a point of contention because they're expensive, but the Fiendsmith version of the deck has the most tops, both at a regional level and a YCS level. So for today's video, we're going to talk about White Forest Fiendsmith Azamina. In the future, we can talk about pure versions or we can talk about the toy box version, but for now, Fiendsmith. So the question I want to ask, or answer in this video rather, is mathematically, how many copies of each card do we actually want to run? So that question is actually really easy to answer. We just have to ask, how many starters do we want to run and how many normal summons do we want to run? And the math for these two questions are actually out there already. We don't have to look it up really, we don't have to calculate it ourselves, we can just look it up. And so I'm going to tell you, the correct number of starters that a meta deck should have is 12 to 13. Mathematically, in a 40 to 45 card deck, 12 to 13 starters. Now, how many normal summons do we want to have? So usually you probably heard pro players say 5 is the magic number. It's actually 4 to 8, but we want to minimize normal summons if we're going to draw cards, which this deck does. And we want to minimize normal summons if we're going to be doing a lot of searching and all that kind of jazz. So let's just say 4 to 5, which is what a lot of pro players also agree with. So we want 4 to 5 normal summons, but we want 12 to 13 starters. How does that make sense? It does, because you have cards like this, which search, it's not actually a normal summon. We have cards like this, that search, it's not actually a normal summon, and so on. So if we take a look at just the White Forest cards, right? So first of all, let's talk about these two cards. Elzet Azamina of the White Forest and Rusia of the White Forest. These cards are not starters. They do nothing on their own, so we can ignore these for this video. So let's talk about these three. Now these two cards actually require you to send a spell or trap card from your hand. So they're not a true starter, but for the most part you'll have a spell or trap, so they should be considered as such. And then of course Silvy is the only card actually that is full combo on her own. And then we'll talk about these cards over here. Wanted and Diabellstar, these also require you to discard a card in order to be combo, and it requires you to run this funny guy, the Magistus Chorozo, in your extra deck in order to be full combo. And I'm actually going to show you the combo later on in this video. So let's just talk about starters for now. If we were to maximize each of these cards at 3 copies apiece, that gets us to 9 cards. 9 is unfortunately not 12 to 13. So the White Forest deck actually just does not have enough starters mathematically, which is why at times this deck can feel inconsistent. And this is why after Alliance Insight, when we get the field spell, this deck will be much more consistent and a much better deck. But for now, we have to work with what we have, and we only have these 9 cards maximum. And we don't even really want to play this card at 3, because it's also a normal summon that's just worse than Silvy. And so if we run both of these at 3, that gets us to 6 normal summons, which is technically still fine if we go between 4 and 8, but we want to minimize, so we want to get to the 4 to 5. So most deck profiles actually play 3 Silvy, 1 Stellar, and I think that's actually the correct number because that gets us to the 4 normal summons that we were talking about earlier, right? And then, so beyond that, if we run, these 4 cards, 3 and 1, 4, and then we run 3 of this, that gets us to 7 cards. It's just not enough starters mathematically. So that's why we have to actually play these cards in order to get to 12 to 13. So if you do the math, if this is 7, we have to actually play 5 to 6 of these cards. And if we look at the top 8 at YCS Birmingham, you can see that they actually played 3, 1, 3, 3, 3. They got to 13 starters and 4 normal summons, which is mathematically the correct number of starters we want to have. And so, yes, every deck profile will tell you that this combo line with the Magistus Chorozo sucks. You have to understand that mathematically, we need this to get enough starters to play the game. And mathematically, sometimes our opponent is not going to open any hand traps, and we're going to open a hand that looks like, oops, 4 hand traps and a wanted, and it's going to be really nice if you play this card into those scenarios, even though it's unlikely. And of course, there's also the other scenario, like maybe we could open this hand and we're playing against a deck that has no hand traps, right? Like you're playing against like Brandon, which doesn't typically have very many hand traps except maybe a few of those, right? So we want to make sure we have a way to get full combo even when we just draw one of these 2 cards. And I know it may feel like 6 copies of, you know, Wanted plus Diabellstar is cloggy, like maybe you've played a game where you opened multiple of these and it felt really bad, but you know, we don't want to use anecdotal evidence as our way of addressing how many copies of each card. We want to use math when possible. And mathematically speaking, it's perfectly acceptable to play both of these at maximum copies. If it really makes you uncomfortable, then consider bumping up a Stellar and reducing Diabellstar. So maybe you could play something like 3 Silvy, 2 a Stellar, that gets 5 normal summons, 3 Azet, that gets you to 8, 3 Wanted, that gets you to, what is that, 11, and then 1 Diabellstar, which gets you to 12, you know? So maybe that's your, you know, ratios that you want to play. But let's, you know, let's use math in order to dictate our decisions instead of just feel anecdotal evidence and so on. So I actually think the YCS Birmingham list was correct. They played 4 normal summons, 13 starters overall. They played this card even though it's bad because, you know, odds are there are games where this will come up and win you the game. Because if you don't run this card, then Diabellstar by herself is going to get you Ilya Sylvia at best, and maybe a Desiree as well. So it's not great. You would rather play with the odds. And in the cases where, you know, you do have hand traps, and you play through this line, then you're probably losing that game anyway. You know, you just have to take things as they are. You know, you can't just play things because they feel wrong. Let's try to use math to the best of our abilities. So let's talk about what a starter actually needs to do in this deck, right? So where do we want to end? Where does our 1-card combo starter actually end us? And it's quite simple. Let's talk about it. They showed this in the YCS Birmingham deck profile, the sort of end board that they were going for. I'm just gonna skip the combo and go to their end board that they had. They had Okay, so they had this end board and they had this set. Okay, so they had this end board, which is basically 5 interruptions, right? There's the Omni Negate 1, Desiree 2, Diabell 3, Sinful Spoils of the White Forest to summon Guardian Chimera as number 4, and the Desiree Send as number 5, assuming that you actually send it with the Sinful Spoils of the White Forest to make the Guardian Chimera. Otherwise, you know, maybe you have another way to send this, you end on IP Masquerena to send it, you have another way to send it, I don't know. Whatever it may be, it's 4 to 5 interruptions with this end board, right? So assuming that this is the end board we want to go for, how do we use these cards with the Chorozo to get there? And I'm going to show you how to do that because they actually didn't show it in their combo video, but I think it's quite important that we know how we get there. And yes, once again, I'm going to reiterate, it plays into every hand trap in the book, but, you know, for the games that it doesn't play into, maybe it'll win us the game. So we're going to use a Diabellstar in our hand because it's going to be worse, because we're going to also have 1 less draw. And so for this combo, we need Diabellstar, of course. We're going to need both a monster and a spell trap, and we're going to need a blank discard. So we're going to start with our blank discard to summon a Diabellstar. Diabellstar is going to then get our Deception set. We're going to activate the Deception. We have to tribute a monster in our hand. We can't tribute the Diabellstar in the field because we actually need the extra body. And we're going to get the Hollowed Azamina here. to our hand, and we're going to immediately activate it, sending the Deception to get the Mu Arceolago to the field. And so now the Mu Arceolago is going to do a search for a Azamina or Sinful Spoils card. This is critical information here, because it can also add an Azamina monster, which is LZ here. And we're going to contact fuse these two, because we have a spellcaster and an extra deck monster into the Magistus Chorozo. Now we can special summon LZ to our field. So here's an interesting point. We can actually add this hollowed Azamina back to our hand and use it as the discard spell or trap card, but it's actually better if we have another spell trap in our hand already. So we're going to pretend that we have it. So we're going to synchro these off into Arceola, and we're going to use the effect discarding a spell or trap card, and then LZ in the graveyard to add a Sinful Spoils spell or trap card. So we're going to add Sinful Spoils of the White Forest and LZ of the White Forest with this combo. So you can see how like we've invested 4 cards in our hand to get to this point. So it's pretty costly, as you imagine, right? So next we're going to, add back the hollowed Azamina. It doesn't really matter which card you spin back here. I'm going to choose to put back the Mu Arceolago because it's slightly better on follow-up turns to summon that if we need to. And from here, we're going to activate LZ in her hand, special summoning her by discarding the Sinful Spoils of the White Forest, which will then set itself back to the fields. So from here, we're going to activate the Hollowed Azamina. Remember, this card is a Sinful Spoils card that can be sent. Oh, sorry. Forgot. This LZ is going to add a Silvy to her hand. Almost forgot. We're going to now activate the Hollowed Azamina to send this Sinful Spoils, and then summon our Omni Negate. So as you can see, we went through a lot of steps. We played into Imperm, we played into Droll, we played into Valor, we played into Nib. But, assuming they have none of these things, then maybe we're still okay. So we get to here, and now we can synchro these 2 cards off into Diabell. And Diabell is going to add back a Spell or Trap. So we're going to add back our Fusion Spell Trap to our hand. And at this point, we actually still have a normal summon, so we can normal summon Silvy. We can add the Tails to our hand, or we can even add a trap card or whatever to our hand if we want instead, but Tails is the best one in this scenario because we still need more bodies. We're going to use Tails to add the Rustia to our hand. We're going to special summon the Rustia. So here, if you have another spell trap in your hand that's maybe not good, you could pitch it for this Rustia to draw a card, but unfortunately, if we use everything, this last card is probably going to be an important hand trap that we want to keep. So maybe we won't be able to do anything about that. Same thing with the Wanted draw. If we started with Wanted instead of Diabellstar here, we could also draw a card and decide whether or not that card's better to discard or not. But we're going to go into the Moon of the Closed Heaven here. We're going into Fiendsmith Requiem. And then we're going to, summon Lacrima. Lacrima is going to send Engraver. And then Engraver is going to summon itself back by shuffling back in Moon. We're going to link these 2 off into, of course, Sequence. Sequence is going to shuffle back our remaining Light Fiends, which is everything. To make Desiree. And then from here, we can link these 2 off into Agnum Day, and Agnum Day can put it down here, back like this, and then we have our spell trap to set. Alternatively, when we're here, instead of summoning Agnum Day, we can actually revive one of our tuner monsters by shuffling back this Arceola, and we can actually link these 2 off into an SP Little Knight here. And we're gonna set this and rip this. So we get to this kind of board state. We only have one card in hand, unfortunately. And so we actually reach a very similar sort of ending point using the Diabellstar. But of course we need Chorozo, and it invested 4 cards in our hand because we only end with this Ash Blossom in our hand left. If we had Wanted, we would have 2 cards, so Wanted is slightly less bad. And the other thing to consider, of course, is we could also not have this SP Little Knight. It could be the Item Day for an additional Spell Trap Send. In this combo, I think it's better to go SP Little Knight because at the end phase we actually get the Deception back because we didn't shuffle it back with Wanted. So we do have a free Spell Trap to send for this Diabellstar. So I think SP Little Knight is a little bit better in this line. And that actually gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 off of the Desiree going to the graveyard. So it's actually slightly better. We actually end on 6 interruptions with this line for the cost of 4 cards in our hands. Assuming our opponent has no hand traps and they have 6 engine cards in their hand, then maybe this will contest their engine cards, and we do technically probably have a hand trap in this last slot. So that's something to consider. And of course, for those who don't know the interactions, this is an Omni Negate right here. This is a Hot Red Negate, which basically negates any face-up card in the field. SP Little Knight is a Tag Out Banish. Diabellstar can send Deception to summon. Most people know about this Silvera being a Book of Eclipse for the opponent's board, but you could also technically, you know, summon this Arciela of the White Forest. You could send this Fiendsmith sequence now as cost, and it can add an effect Veiler to your hand because that is a light spellcaster tuner. Actually, it's just a light spellcaster, but it's a light spellcaster. Veiler is a light spellcaster, so it technically is a different form of interaction. Like maybe you're playing in a fusion deck where Book of Eclipsing your opponent's board is not that effective, so maybe this card could be more effective because you'll get an effect Veiler to your hand. That's just something to consider. And then of course you can then on the summon of either of these synchro monsters, you get the LZ back to your hand. Yep, because a spellcaster tuner monster was summoned to your field. And then of course you could activate the spell card here using away 2 cards on your field and the LZ from your hand to make a Guardian Chimera. Guardian Chimera will also draw you a card and pop 2. If you had wanted to shuffle back, you could maybe have 2 cards in your hand, like 2 monsters in your hand, but that's otherwise, you know, at least you were guaranteed the 1 draw. And then finally in the graveyard, the Desiree will shuffle back to send a card on the field. So that's 6 total interruptions on this end board. Assuming you SP Little Knight, if you don't, it's 5. So that is the end board piece, right? And the only other thing I would like to talk about in this video was the combo that was showcased in the YCS Birmingham list. So they ended on the same sort of fields, and their combo involved Silvy plus a Speller Trap. They actually had 2 Speller Traps, but we're going to go with the 1 Speller Trap route. And so they actually did something like normal summon Silvy effects get, you know, the tails get LZ of the White Forest to the hand. And then they did special LZ pitching the Spell Trap in order to search the LZ Azamina. And then they specialed the LZ Azamina and they synchroed this off into Arciela. And they had another Spell Trap card to pitch to search the trap card, but we're just going to ignore that because that doesn't matter. But we're going to get the LZ Azamina effect search for the Deception. They then here synchroed these 2 off into Diabellstar, or I keep calling her Diabellstar, Diabell the Queen, and they added back their Spell Trap that was maybe an interruption, maybe not. And then from here you could special back the Silvy to have a body for this deception. So the thing I want to talk about is in their combo line, they got to this point, and this is actually the 6th summon. So if you get nibbed here, right, on this point, and now we have a Nibiru token on the field, which cannot be used as a tribute for deception because it is not able to go to the graveyard. We have a problem, because assuming that these cards are not monsters, if they're monsters, obviously we can still tribute for deception, but let's say we had 4 Speller Traps in our hand, we're actually stuck, because we have no way to revive this Silvy because we already used it this turn. The token doesn't do anything, the deception doesn't do anything, and we're at a loss. So this Nibiru actually really hurts. And we actually didn't need to play into this Nibiru. So why did we? The reason why we did is, of course, you know, potentially we could end on a slightly better card in hand or something like that. Either way, it's a little bit silly, and I want to address this sort of mistake that they made. Because I kind of disagree with the line that they went for. So let me go back and show you like how we should be sort of addressing this sort of combo, right? So we're going to start back with our hand. This is Silvy plus 1 Speller Trap. So you're going to normal summon the Silvy, and you're going to get the Tails. We're going to activate Tails, and instead of searching for LZ of the White Forest, we're going to search for LZ Azamina of the White Forest instead. So we're then going to special summon it, and we're going to synchro these two off into the LZ, or so the Arciela. And then we're going to pitch our spell and trap card here with the Arciela effect. And then we're going to get the LZ effect as well. So we're going to get the LZ of the White Forest and the Deception here. So from here, you're going to activate the Deception. And so we don't have a guaranteed monster to tribute unless we tribute either the LZ from our hand or the Arciela from our fields. And I'm actually going to tribute the Arciela from our fields. And I'm going to show you why. So we're going to tribute that, and we're going to get the Hollowed Azamina to our hand now. And so if we look at our summons, so this has been 3 summons so far. We're going to activate Hollowed. We're going to get Mu Arcielago. This is going to be our 4th summon. Mu Arcielago is going to activate to get Wanted to our hand. We're going to get Hollowed back to our hand by shuffling back the LZ Azamina to our extra deck, to our deck. And then we're going to do the old 1-2 to get Diabellstar to our hand and summon Ilia Sylvia, our Omni Negate. So by doing it the combo line this way, you can see that we have reached Ilia Sylvia on exactly summon number 5. So we have not given our opponent the opportunity to nib up until this point. So from here, we're going to use our extra draw from Wanted by shuffling back the Deception to get any random card. We're going to indicate that with this infinite impermanence here. And we're going to pitch our extra draw or our worst card in hand, or like maybe our draw was actually good. Who knows? And we're going to set the Sinful Spoils of the White Forest. Awesome. So next we're going to link these two off into Moon of the Closed Heaven. We're going to do the old Moon into Requiem, Requiem into Lacrima. You've seen this combo hundreds of times, I'm sure. We're going to summon the Lacrima and dump the Engraver. And here we're going to equip the Requiem to the Lacrima, and we can special summon our LZ by sending the Requiem. And LZ is going to search Russia. Pretty much the last name that we care about. We're going to special summon the Russia by its own effect, and then we're going to use its effect sending the Sinful Spoils of the White Forest to draw a random card. So we're going to indicate that random draw with this Imperm as well. And then of course, this is a White Forest card, so it's going to reset itself to the fields. And so from here, really interesting, this is a tuner and a non-tuner, so we can actually synchro these cards into Diabell. And now, Diabell won't get you a Speller Trap card back from the graveyard because it requires a tuner synchro monster to get that effect. However, we're still going to have her as an interruption. And then we're going to use Engraver, shuffling back Moon to summon itself back to the fields. We're going to link these two off to make Sequence. And we're going to use Sequence to make Desiree by shuffling the rest of our Light Fiends back, which is all of these. And then from here, we can actually do what we did before with the Agnum Day to get a free Speller Trap card send, but we actually still have the effect of both of our tuners to summon back by returning the RCL to the extra deck. And then we can use these two cards to go into SP Little Knight. So for this line, the only thing to consider, equip the Engraver as well. Equip the Sequence as well. So the only thing to consider with this line specifically is that this Diabell does not have a free Speller Trap card to send, because this is, of course, we want to use all our stuff. So the only thing to consider with this combo line is that we want to use our Desiree first, and then send the Sequence off for the Desiree. But this is a 1-card combo. We still have 4 cards in hand. We didn't play into Nib, and we ended on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 interruptions. So we still end on the full end board. The only difference, we didn't play into Nib. And the only thing that we had to do was get a little creative with synchroing using our tuner monster and Lacrima, which is a level 4. Isn't that pretty sweet? The only other thing to consider is that instead of making a synchro, 2 level 4s also makes an XYZ, which could be Abyss Dweller. Now you probably wouldn't make it with Lacrima here. We would actually, when we have this field, we would actually summon back our Silvy and then make our Abyss Dweller here. And then, make our Desiree with Lacrima instead. So let me go back just so we're not confused. So when we were at, we were at this board state. I think this was set, right? We had just summoned this Rusia. We had this LZ on the field, and we had this. So we were at this board state, right? Bear with me here. We had just sent this Sinful Spoils of the White Forest to the graveyard, which will reset itself. So here, we would have Silvy in the graveyard, because she was our starter, and we would still have this Rusia in the graveyard, RCL in the graveyard. So we can spin this back to summon this, right? And then here we can make a Abyss Dweller. And then we would summon back our Engraver here by shuffling our Moon. Use these two to make Sequence. Sequence would make Desiree by shuffling everything back. And then we still have this LZ on the field, so we can use that to summon SP Little Knight. So we end on this board instead, which is a little bit different. So in the matchups where Abyss Dweller is a better card, that might be something worth considering. The only thing really important to note if you go for this board, you have no way of getting a Stellar back to your hand, because she requires a tuner spellcaster to be summoned on your opponent's turn. So because of that, you don't have a guaranteed monster to make Guardian Chimera. That's just one really important thing to consider when you're going for this combo line. But in the event that you're going for this combo line, this Abyss Dweller probably just wins you the game. So that's just something to consider, and maybe you just have another monster in your hand anyway. And really neat thing about this is you could use this effect in the draw phase, and if they try to negate it, you can, you know, chain this card to tag out. It's obviously not great. You also have the SP Little Knights and to try to force through Diabellstar. So those are two things. To note. Also, the other thing with this board to note is that if you're using this to fusion summon to Guardian Chimera, consider these two cards will be tagged out. So you only have these two cards. So you're forced to get rid of your Dweller in order to make the Guardian Chimera, assuming you don't have any other monster in hand to just make 2 draws and 1 pop Guardian Chimera. So all these things, you know, little caveats here and there, but hopefully you found this video informative or helpful. If you enjoyed this, you know, leave a comment, leave a like. You know, maybe I'm human, you know, maybe I made some mistakes, maybe I could have done some combo lines better as well. But let's try to get our, you know, White Forest boys, where are you at? You know, this deck is really cool. Let's get better at it together. And I hope you enjoy this video. Have a nice day.